Hey everyone, welcome back to Wild Tony Farms, and today we're going to be getting into a new video. And before we get into the video, please go on and click the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Let's go on and get into the video. Hello everyone, welcome back to another Wildwoods Beekeeping live podcast. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I see a lot of good folks already joining in tonight. So in this podcast, we will be having Blake Shook from the Bee Supply. So I just want to real quick tell you thank you so much for spending some time with me tonight.
My pleasure, Grayson. Appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So in all my live streams, if people know me, I start out pretty much the same way. I just wondered if you could just briefly share with us a little bit of who you are and kind of how you got into beekeeping.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So, started when I was about 12 years old. So, I don't know how old you are when you started, but how old were you, by the way?
I am 15 right now.
15? When did you start beekeeping? I
I
think you
started
probably
around
beat
like
me.
probably 8 or
Amazing. So, you got me beat by a mile. That's awesome. So, yeah, I started when I was 12. I was in a youth scholarship program that got me into beekeeping and really fell in love with beekeeping and as a hobby and did bee removals, built equipment for other beekeepers, made splits, and then really just started growing my bee business through high school and went into full-time commercial beekeeping when I graduated high school and have since diversified into about 6 different companies in the beekeeping space. So, got a couple different commercial migratory beekeeping businesses. We've got a chain of bee supply companies for one for small scale beekeepers, one for commercial beekeepers. We pack and sell honey to major retailers. We broker bees in California for almond pollination, and then we raise and sell a lot of honeybees too. So, well, 6 different businesses in the beekeeping space.
Absolutely. So let me real quick open up my notes. I always keep my um questions, my personal questions, but feel free y'all to put questions in. We will star those and answer them a little bit later. So my first question is, since we are in March, I'm doing a lot of things. I'm sure you're doing a lot of things. So I just wanted to real quick ask is, what are your plans for this upcoming spring?
Yeah, so I mean, it's all about splitting. I mean, that is our main focus as we go into March, and we start splitting bees now. So we've got crews in California doing splits. We've got crews in Texas, where I'm based, doing splits, and so we'll be splitting 20 hours a day, but for the next month. We usually try to finish splits by mid-April. And so that's really our entire focus: splitting, getting queen cells in the splits, feeding, and then mid-April we'll start doing checkbacks. And then so mid-April to mid-May is all about checkbacks, equalizing hives, fixing hives, getting them ready for the honey crop.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually one of my questions on my topics, was to ask you about how you make your splits, and I plan here soon to start making some splits as well. It's getting that time of year down here in Alabama. You are in Texas, right?
Right, right.
Yep. So I guess you're a little bit more hotter, but we usually have warm days this time of the year. It's been really nice, and I've just been, pretty much put some feed on the colonies, getting them built up, and they're going to do some splits
Mm.
here very soon. I'm not sure
When when
when. So
When does your honey flow start? Where your primary
ours,
honey flow?
probably in the next couple of weeks it'll be privet. All right, that's our first
Okay.
flow. And we'll have tallow.
Yeah.
Those are our main two big ones, but we'll have some flowers trickle in here and there.
Okay. And tallow starts mid-May for you?
Yep, somewhere
Early
around
May?
there. Yep, around that
Early to
time.
mid-May. It's the same for us here in Texas. So yeah, early to mid-May our tallow starts. We have some privet, not a lot. And so we usually find that as long as we finish splits by early April, we can make a tallow crop as long as we use mated queens and 3 to 4 good frames of brood. And then we can still make a tallow crop.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see. My next topics is what are some lessons you have learned in beekeeping? I've learned a lot of things, but I've
Yeah.
always all my chats ask people that question. I've always found that
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
That's well, I'll the fastest I've learned the fastest way to make $1 million in beekeeping is to start with $2 million. So that's a life lesson. I think that the biggest thing I try to do is stay ahead of schedule. So whether I'm working 2 beehives in my backyard or 20 or 30,000 in my commercial operation, my goal is always to stay at least a week to 10 days ahead of everything. So if it's time to put on supers, I try to be a week early. If I'm doing mite treatments, I try to be a week early. If I'm making splits, I try to be a week early. And then I usually find that that makes me on time because things happen, delays happen. And so trying to be proactive, trying to be early on my management is important. Um, on a small scale, I would say it boils down to learn how to handle varroa mites and learn how to feed properly and then requeen. And you've pretty much got beekeeping figured out. So queens, feed, and varroa. Those are the three areas that I think everyone should focus on of any scale.
yeah. My next question is: I was thinking, talking about mites, and I was going to divide it into different questions, but I decided just to put it all in one. Is how do you manage your bees? Mites, feeding, and more.
Hmm. It's a big question. And I would say for feeding, I'll give some general rule of thumb that I kind of live by. So I want, there's no point in the year where I want any one of my hives to have less than 20 pounds of stores at a bare minimum. So a good hive that's at least a single box full of bees should never have less than 20 pounds of stores at any point. Go over winter, going into winter, they should have more like, 40 to 50 pounds, but, 20 pounds bare minimum. Um, I feed proactively. I don't want my hives, once they're below that 20-pound mark, I really see starvation effects start to kick in. So they start shutting the queen down to some extent. They start to, they start to reduce her down. They might start cannibalizing a little bit of brood. Bad things start to happen. So that's my overall goal of feeding is to maintain bare minimum of 20 pounds. As far as varroa mites, my goal is to I test for varroa mites about every 6 weeks while there's brood present in the hive. So when there's no brood present, you're not going to have varroa mites reproducing. But when you do have brood, so February through October, for those of us in the South, I'm testing about every 6 weeks. And I usually find that I have to treat 3 times per year. So usually sometime in February or March, I'm doing a treatment. That's usually a thymol-based treatment, so Apogard. And then usually I have to treat sometime in June. So right after you harvest honey, I usually do a treatment. And that's going to be something like an Apivar because it's fine in the hot weather. And then there will be a final treatment usually in September as the bees are getting ready to go into winter. And most things work decently well in that final treatment. So 3 treatments. Try to rotate treatments. And I would add that you always need to test to make sure your treatments worked. if you're going to treat for varroa mites, because many times if you put a treatment on, doesn't necessarily mean it worked. Then we're experimenting with oxalic acid extended release in the gel form in the sponges. So we're experimenting quite a bit with that and pretty happy with the results so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, into managing bees, what do you run? Singles, double deeps? What do you run in your
Yeah,
apiary?
I run double deeps for a lot of reasons, which I'm happy to get into or not. But yeah, double deeps are what we run exclusively. We've experimented with singles. We've experimented with a deep and a medium for brood boxes. Certainly tried it all, and have always landed back at double deeps.
Yeah. Well, I've usually always ran, singles, but this year, I've been
Mhm.
trying to focus on growing. I don't want to buy any nukes like I did last year. By the way,
Yeah.
I went in with six, came out with four. So, I'm using these four colonies. Most of them are in singles, but right now, two are in double deeps. I plan just, get them up in double deeps and split them with 5 frame splits. Get four out of one colony. So I've also used doubles in the past. But I've also used
Mhm.
singles. For me, down here, it's sometimes a little bit more easier for me to overwinter with a single, and then in summer, spring, if I want to grow pretty big, I'll go into a double.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got that luxury of being in the deep south.
Yeah,
You can feed all winter. Further north, or if you're, it's more challenging because you need to, you can't get in there and feed, or you can feed, but they're not going to store it, and they're not going to break the cluster to feed. So yeah, in the south you can get away with the singles. The doubles, I hear you on the growth. So that's
yeah,
I've never really stopped growing, and so that's why I've
yeah,
always done doubles because it's easier to split, and you've got your comb ready for your split the next year. And then if you're transporting bees around the country, there's other benefits. But yeah, if you're in a growth mode, double deeps are great. If you're
yeah.
not trying to grow, then you can get away with singles in the south.
Oh yeah. So my next question will be, what is your favorite thing about keeping bees, and also what is your work, or I guess your least favorite thing about
Yeah.
beekeeping?
Good question, man. Favorite thing about keeping bees. So, a couple things come to mind. One is from a business side, and then the other is just purely from a beekeeping side. So there's nothing quite like beekeeping in the spring. It's like no matter what you do, bees are going to grow in the spring. They're just, you can have a half a frame of bees in brood and they just explode and grow, and fresh pollen's coming in, queens laying like crazy. There's nothing quite as relaxing as just working bees and going through bees in the spring. So I still, even though I've been doing this for 22 years and run tens of thousands of hives, I still love to just go work a beehive in the spring. So
Yeah,
love that about it from a beekeeping standpoint. From a business standpoint, I love the opportunity of diversification. So, you can do pollen, you can do honey, you can make propolis, you can soaps and lip balms, and you can sell bees, you can sell queens, there's limitless opportunities to find out what you love in beekeeping and do that as a hobby, a sideline business, or a full-time business. So, love the ability to do all sorts of things.
yeah,
Least favorite, as a job, the nights get a little long sometimes.
yeah,
So I think when you're splitting bees, it's fun the first day, and then the 20th day gets a little old.
yeah,
So the long days, the long nights are a bit of a challenge. I think probably the hardest thing is just when bees die. I never get used to that, even though I've lost thousands of hives over the years. There's nothing quite as discouraging as, hey, I think I did everything right, and my bees died anyway, and that is so discouraging. And so I think that's the hardest part for me.
oh yeah, absolutely. You're talking about your business, so I kind of wanted to discuss about that, and also I did leave your business link in the bee supply and the YouTube channel in the description below if
Thank
anybody wants
you.
to pick them
That's
out.
kind.
But
Thank you.
I want to ask you, how did you grow your business? Your business standpoint. Your
Mm,
website, things that you do in the bee yard as a business.
yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a happy accident, to be honest, Grayson. I mean, it wasn't like I started with this, huge business plan and rolled out my master plan, I just loved beekeeping. I kind of like you, I think. I mean, I love bees. And so I would say through my teenage years, I experimented with everything, bee removals, selling equipment, selling nooks, raising queens, harvesting pollen, making creamed honey, selling at farmers markets. I just tried everything. And I did it because I loved it. And I was also trying to make some money at it. But what it really did is it showed me what I was good at, what I was bad at. And I got to do that at a time where I didn't have to make a living. So, again, kind of a happy accident. I got lucky, that I could do all that in high school. And then once I graduated, I'd already kind of found my niche and I was able to move into it full time. Other things that were a huge advantage, I found people that were sideline or commercial beekeepers, and I worked for them. And so starting at about 15 years old, I started working for sideline and commercial beekeepers that were really good at what they did. And that gave me incredible experience that I never could have gotten otherwise to then go on and build a business. So yeah, endless tips. I mean, building a business in the bee world is complicated and challenging. We could talk about it all night, but those are some of the basics, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to appreciate everybody who's joining in tonight. And if you weren't here, we will answer questions later on the stream. I have a couple more topics we'll talk about, and then we'll get into questions if there are any questions. So thank you all for checking in tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces. We have a Rob from the Raw Bees, with the OA Vapor. So good to see you, Rob. A lot of familiar, we have these live streams every, Monday night at 7 p.m. That's always fun to see everybody who's in here. We have Steve, DC, and a whole bunch of our folks who are just checking in. So good to see y'all. Thank y'all for checking in tonight. I do appreciate everybody coming in for our live stream. My next question / topic is, I know you've probably been being asked this a lot, if the whole bee collapse and all this stuff. So we pretty much, everybody probably knows what's going on. But I was going to ask, is there any new updates or anything that you know about it, or is it's just the same things
Mm,
as we've been kind of talking about?
yeah. Good question. So there continues to be trickles of information. So,
Yeah.
if you're keeping up with it, the Project Apis Elm survey that was published a couple weeks back now was a big deal because that was the first attempt at quantifying the collapse. And that was really important for all of us in the industry to understand how severe or not the collapse was. And then that was super important because now what that's allowing us to do is take those results to researchers, to legislators, to try to find answers. So, if some of your listeners haven't seen that statistic, those statistics, it was about $650 million loss over the past 8 months, which is a lot when the beekeeping industry, has a total annual revenue of less than $1 billion. So it's, over half of our annual revenue was eliminated by this last loss. About 1.1 million hives lost out of, 2.5-ish million commercially managed. That's about 68% of hives lost over the past 8 months. If you look at the past year, it's about 80% of bees, compared to a normal loss rate of about 40 to 45%. So, all that to say, it's a big deal. By far the worst loss ever, in the industry. So, there have begun to be some emerging theories, and this is all speculation. So, but there's talk of a new virus, an iridescent virus is what it's called, and there's the bee industry is helping fund some research and some purchasing of new equipment to detect new viruses, and this is a virus that we're starting to see that's new. So I do think there's a good chance that there is some virus at play here. Um, Amitraz resistance is a topic that keeps coming up as well. I don't think by any stretch it's to blame because there are a ton of beekeepers still seeing a lot of good efficacy, myself included, with Amitraz based products. But I think that we are starting to see increased Amitraz resistance. So that's going to be a key player. I think that pesticides, herbicides, fungicides are continually playing a role. So those three things are kind of, I think, what we're going to find, in my opinion, as the cause here. And even though I don't believe we can point to any one of those things as the chief cause, they're all having such a negative effect on the bees and their health that the bees just can't stand up to all those pressures at once, which is what happened the first time in 2016, 17, when we had colony collapse disorder. It's the bees weren't able to stand up to all the pressures that were facing them. And so I think that the players move around a little bit, or the calls move around a little bit with each collapse. But but again, we've reached this tipping point where the bees can't stand up to it anymore. And that's clearly, we've clearly seen a tipping point here. So that's the latest as far as causes or potential causes. We're working very hard as an industry to get relief for beekeepers that have had these huge losses. So economic relief so they can rebuild. And I'd say that's not going great, in my opinion. And it's really the political environment that we're in right now. It's a really bad time to be trying to get attention or money, because there's a lot going on in the political climate right now, and not a lot of money being passed out,
Yeah.
which is fine. But beekeepers are the backbone of all of agriculture,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and if they don't rebuild in the next month, they're not going to be able to rebuild, because you can't build bees in the summer. So anyway, that was the long spiel,
No,
but
no.
that's the latest of what's going on.
Yeah, we do have a question, around the topic from DC's as asks a virus that doesn't show up in the health of the bees before the bees die.
Um, yeah, so uh, this I'm not. I'm going to guess DC's bees at your question there a little bit. I think you might be asking, you know, um, can we detect this virus before the bees die? The answer is yes. So we would be able to detect it before the bees die. The tough thing about viruses, though, is we have no treatment protocol. There is no treatment. We can treat bacterias, we can treat funguses, we can treat pests like varroa mites, but we
Yeah,
have no therapies for
viruses.
viruses. So all we can do is control our varroa mites, because varroa mites are the main transmitters of viruses.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yep. I don't think I have any more topics. Let me check real quick. We do have some questions that I'll pop up in just a second.
For
No, I
sure.
do. I think we covered everything that I so that's good. So let me pop up our next question is from Steve Amos, and he says, "Question: I think drones are underappreciated, and our plastic foundation causes a lot of burr comb. What's the preference? Green frame, starter strips, partial plastic, leaving room to make drone comb?"
Good question. And happy to hear your thoughts on this too, Grayson. But I do think drones are somewhat underappreciated. The jury is often out. I know some beekeepers that try to have a green drone frame in every hive, so that the bees aren't building the drones between the boxes, or drawing out sheets of drone comb. And I think it's a good idea. I like the green drone frames. I find them less messy. I find if I've only got a partial frame, then the bees tend to make a little more of a mess. That being said, I think it's Randy Oliver that does this, and I do kind of like it. I think he leaves like a half a frame, a blank space on half of a frame without foundation, and then the bees always draw out drone brood in that half a frame, and then it makes it really easy when you're going through the hive. If it's capped drone brood on that partial, that blank spot, they just, you can just scrape it off and get rid of some varroa mites that way. So it's kind of it certainly won't control varroa mites completely, but it's a natural way to help control varroa. So I kind of like that. You run the risk of bees drawing out that open space kind of wonky. So I would say this: if you're a beginner beekeeper, and you want to practice some drone comb rotation, I would go with the green drone frame, because it's going to be a little cleaner. Um, you've really got to pay attention to varroa mite levels if you're going to have a drone frame in there, because varroa mite varroa mites love to reproduce in drone brood, And so if you've got all these, this frame of drone brood always hatching out, you can really spike your varroa mite population. So you've got to be extra vigilant with varroa mites if you're going to do drone brood.
Yeah. I actually had a video about, drone comb a while back, and I bought some drone comb. I've never actually used it for, the mites. I probably should. I think that'd be a great way to do so, but I've always put it in there for the reason Steve said was to, have some room for drones. I don't have any in the hives at this moment though, I
Yeah.
have some like empty frames that they pull out of with drones. A lot of times what I will do, if I run out of like plastic foundation or something, I sometimes will let them draw their own comb once in a while. I don't really like to do that all the time because you have that all the like you have like one frame full of drones, and I'd rather
Yeah.
it be like half drones, maybe a little bit of drones, and then mainly worker a frame. So I've had
Right.
to work around that because there's this one time where I was going into winter with a colony that had this one frame of drone comb that's right in the middle. It kind of got in my way or whatever, so I put it to the side because they're not going to be using it unless they're using it for honey. Of course, they can use that
Mm.
for honey. So what I've also done is a lot of people probably don't do this, and I'm not saying I'm not recommending this way of doing so, but a lot of times what I sometimes will do is put supers in the deeps, and I don't do this on purpose. Sometimes I really just have to real quick stick it in there, and a lot of times what they'll do is they'll draw that little part under there of drones, mainly because that's what they like to do. But if you don't put anything, like drone comb or anything like that, they'll start to on the worker. At least what I've seen on the worker frames, they'll start to raise drones on there.
Mm.
Of course, I'm not
Yes.
a
Yeah.
professional or anything, but that's kind of
No,
how I've seen it.
I share your experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now this is a question that's directed to me, but I'm going to let both of us answer that. Is when does your honey flow start? And we actually talked about that right at the start of the live stream. Mine's probably will start. My main flow will start very, very soon. It's mainly privet and tallow, which is our big producers, which we mainly get a lot of honey from in spring. Tallow should start anytime now. I mean, it should be in a couple weeks. I don't really know exactly. I'm not really a professional on flowers or whatever. I really need to. I've been trying to do more research on that, but around that time frame, and then later on, like in May, mid-May, early May, somewhere around there is whenever our tallow goes in. So we'll have the privet first. The privet will start to die out right whenever the tallow comes out. What about you, Blake? I know
Yeah.
you're near location. I'm sure you probably have some similar stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. I mean, really all along the Gulf Coast, I produce honey in the Houston area along the Gulf Coast, and it's very similar. Privet, will get started in a couple weeks, and you really it's hard to make splits and make a crop on privet because it's so early. So usually it only works if you're not splitting bees to make a privet crop. If you are splitting, then privet's a great flow to build bees up on. And then tallow is often where we make our primary honey crop, which is, usually depending on where in the Gulf Coast you are, May 1st to May 15th, somewhere in there is when tallow usually starts. Um, where I actually live near Dallas, Texas, which is almost into Oklahoma, so more northern Texas, and our flow really starts about the same. Usually, first 2 weeks of May, it's just a wildflower crop. So I would say that the southern United States in general is, late April to mid-May is when your flow is typically going to start.
Yeah. DC says, I wonder how much solar radiation a honeybee is exposed to over their short lifetime.
Well, it's a good question. I'd say relatively easy to calculate um, based on the lifespan of a forager bee. Because prior to being a forager, for the most part, they're inside the hive, so very little solar exposure. But the depending on the duration of the forager stage, we could pretty easily calculate how much they're exposed to. Don't know. I've never seen a study on the effects of that. What effect solar radiation has on honeybee? Be an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah. Stan Gores, good to see you, Stan, from Texas. friendly beekeepers, and yes, I get asked a lot when folks are feeding sugar water before for buildup. How do you know when the nectar flow starts if sugar water and nectar look similar? That's something I've came across a lot of times, and whenever I'm in my hives, I actually was thinking about that earlier. Is whenever I'm going through hives, and um any type of hive, and this time of year, I'm looking in my colony. I'm looking at all this nectar, and a lot of times I say in my videos that, hey, this is nectar, blah blah blah. I really don't think about it, but then I go back to the video. I'm like, hey, this is most likely just sugar water. This most likely isn't nectar because I'm feeding sugar water, but there's not much way to know. What do you think about it?
Yeah, good question. Good to see you, or good to see from, not see you, Stan, but it's good to hear from you. Yeah, so I think I would do what Stan often recommends, which is, you put some honey, a frame of honey, or a little bit of sugar water, 20 feet from your beehive, and see if the bees rob it. If your bees are, you let it sit there for 20 or 30 minutes, and if bees are robby, then there's not much of a natural nectar flow. Once your natural nectar flow begins, your bees are not going to be robbing much because they're going to be more interested in foraging on that on the nectar. So that's a good test to see, is it sugar water, or is there a flow beginning? For me, it's really all about also knowing your local forage. So
Right.
I know in North Texas where I am, when the Gaillardia and the Scabiosa start blooming, my major nectar flows here. If you're on the Gulf Coast, once that tallow starts blooming, your major flows here. So you can watch what the bees are doing, and then you can watch what the flowers are doing, and that'll usually tell you if your flow has begun or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Steve Keefe does in North Carolina. If they aren't hitting a bit of open feed, flow is going on. But if they do,
Right.
there's talking not much of a flow going on. So yeah, Big Mike mentioned that the green frames was also a way to propagate a good queen genetics via their drones. Basically, more drones from great queens.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely. Yeah, if you've got that queen that's a phenomenal producer, then yeah, stick some drone frames in there. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's where that's actually the main reason why I actually got Green Drone Come was actually to raise some nukes like 2 years ago whenever I was gonna do some queens, I was gonna raise some queens. It really didn't go the way I wanted it to. It was my first time doing so, I really didn't do it that much. And the reason why I didn't do it anymore was because I lost my grafting tool. I think I might have accidentally thrown it away or something. But the good thing is I did buy some more, so I got a whole pack here, so I will not be losing. I should not go to zero anytime soon. So I was able to get some more. So I'm not really sure about this year, but hopefully sometime in the future I'm gonna do some queens. But that was actually the main reason why I bought those green drone combos, just in case if I need to, when I start racing queens sometime in the future, and when at that moment, I was gonna get some good healthy drones from my good stock. Yeah, that's plan. Let's see. Also, when they turn into bullets leaving the house without just pollen baskets coming back. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an indicator for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of pollen coming in. That's for sure. Like a boatloads of pollen that's been coming in my hives, which is a good thing. And what I've been trying to do is build up my hives. I actually had a recent video that's doing pretty well so far, and just me going out there and just showing me building up some colonies. And because I'm trying to build up to make some strong splits, kind of like we talked a
Mm.
little bit about earlier, build up some strong splits, because I've had a problem in the past where I would make very weak splits, small splits, and those never did well. I couldn't get them to work. There was only one time where I got it to work, and got into spring, but it didn't make it. So this year I've been building these bees up pretty good, and they're looking very very good. A lot of bees and healthy colonies. I'm looking forward to what I can do with them. Make
That's
some split.
fantastic. So how many frames of brood do you put in your splits?
Oh,
And
my split.
and is your objective to make a honey crop or just grow bees?
That's a good question. And actually, this year's to grow bees. I'm really thinking this year's just going to be focusing on expanding. 4 colonies right now, and I plan to try to get up to double. Get up to 8. If I can get more than that, that's great. I'm thinking I'm gonna be focusing on growth, because last year, I got a lot of honey. I got like 7 gallons of honey,
Mm,
which isn't a lot to y'all, but for us,
that's
that's
great.
a pretty good amount. For
Yeah.
Actually, last year I was actually surprised I even got that much honey because we came out of winter with only one colony, and I was able to get some
Mm-hmm.
nukes expand. Those nukes grew up very, very fast, put a super on them, and there you go. I was able to get some honey from
That's
the
phenomenal.
bees, which was
Yeah,
well, pretty
that's
good,
great.
coming out of one colony. But yeah,
That really is.
yeah. Oh, also your other question about how much frames I put, how much brood I'm going to put in a split this year. I'm hoping to put a good amount of brood in the frame. Just I want to put as much as I possibly can. Probably like 3 frames of brood is probably what I
Yeah.
want. If I
Hmm.
have more brood in my colony, I'll do more. Which will help. Whenever I put my queen cells in. And I guess I'll say how I'm going to do my splits of this year. I've been thinking a lot. Like there's times where I'm sitting down, I don't really have anything to do, so I just think about what I'm going to be doing with my splits. Because trying to plan out pretty good, have a plan A, have a plan B. Because a lot of times you have to revert to a different plan. So I've been thinking, and I'm thinking that this year I'm just going to let the bees, get ready to swarm, let them build their queen cells,
Mm-hmm.
because those queen cells, the swarm cells, they're going to be some good queen cells. Those are the best cells that you can get. I'm gonna let them do their thing. Whenever they are ready to swarm and they have those queen cells in there, I'm gonna cut those queen cells out, and then that's whenever I'm gonna split. I'm gonna take the 5 frame splits out of a double deep, 5 with the queen, take her somewhere else, and then I'll have the queen cells to put in the other ones that are queenless. Now I want to ask you. I don't know. I can't remember exactly if you told me exactly, but how are you going to be doing splits? Like, are you going to be doing 5 frame, 3 frame splits, and how much brood are you going to be putting in your splits?
Yeah. I mean, our normal split is 3 frames of brood, just like you.
Oh,
So that I would say that's our standard split. Now,
yeah,
we aren't expecting to make a honey crop on that anytime soon. So when we do a 3 frame split, in late March or early April, those bees are not going to make a honey crop until they go to North Dakota, and that crop isn't going to start until for the 4th of July. And so that's a very late crop. The bees have a long time to build. If I'm trying to make a honey crop in the South, so by early to mid May, then I'm doing 3 frames of brood April 1st. If I don't split until the second week of April, I'm doing 4 frames of brood. If I don't split till the third week of April, I'm doing 5 frames of brood. Fourth week of April, 6 frames of brood. Um, and I'm using a mated queen. So essentially, if I expect to make a honey crop every week past the first week of April, they get an extra frame of brood beyond 3 frames. So you've got to make pretty strong splits if you're trying to make a honey crop. Now, if you're just trying to grow like yourself this year,
yeah.
then yeah, 3 frames of brood, no problem. That's plenty to get a hive going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I kind of came across whenever I'm thinking about how I'm going to be doing my splits is knowing what I'm going to be focusing on. If I'm going to be focusing on growing, or if I'm going to be focusing on making a honey crop. And
Hmm.
before I was thinking what I'm going to do, and I just told myself, hey, I really need to just be focusing on expanding this year. That's going to be my main focus. Of course, if you want to expand while be able to get a honey crop, I would think that is possible, but you'd have to make a very, very strong split. In my eyes, I think you'd have to do like a, you know, down the middle split, of a double deep. I think you could get away with that if you do that somewhat early and then go on into spring and then be able to get a honey crop. I mean, I was able to get a honey crop whenever I got some nukes, in 5 frame split, which wasn't a whole lot. You're not going to be able to get a
Hmm.
big, crop. You'll be able to get a
Sure.
little bit. You just can't
Yeah.
take it all. Looks like we
Right.
got a
Right.
good amount of questions down here. Steve,
Great.
one more question. Blake, what is the deal with the Amiflex? I never heard of it until yesterday, and it's been out almost for 2 years.
Yeah. So Amaflex, if you're not if I know you, Steve, you probably know all about it, but if other folks aren't familiar with Amaflex, it is a amitraz based treatment. So Apivar is the amitraz strip that you can put in a hive, the plastic strip. And the main criticism of Apivar is that it's a very slow release treatment. And so if your bromide levels are high and you put an Apivar strip in, it kind of maintains the bromites, but it doesn't drop them down where they should be because it's a very kind of a long, slow kill. So Vita Pharma, who makes Apivar, came out with Amiflex, which is a gel-based. It's a gel substance that has the amitraz, the active ingredient amitraz in it, you can put the gel on, and it's a very fast release. So it can knock down high mite levels really quickly, which is super helpful if you've got high mite levels. The problem with it is it's not approved for use by the general public in most states. So in it's not approved at all actually in most states. In a handful of states, you can get it if you have a pest applicator's license. So you've got to have a special license to be able to buy it and use it. So some commercial beekeepers do have that license and are able to use it. For most small scale beekeepers, they're not going to go take a whole quiz and a 2-day course and get this license just to be able to use a mite treatment. So
Yeah.
that's why it's not more widespread right now, because it's not accessible. So the Vita Pharma, the manufacturer of it, is really working to get it more widely approved so that anybody can buy it and use it without that license. They just haven't been able to do that yet. So hopefully later this year they'll be able to get that done. But until that happens, yeah, it's gonna be a pretty niche treatment, unfortunately.
Rob from Larby says, Blake, have you ever ran any of the pre-drawn comb, like a better comb? Curious on your take to capture short flow windows with young hives. I'm short on drawn supers.
Yeah. Hey, good to hear from you as always. I've not tried it. No, I was fascinated by it. I did a lot of research on the machine that makes it because I was like, okay, how do the economics work on this thing? Could we buy a machine, and what does it cost for bees to draw comb versus if we did it? And I've talked to a lot of people that have used it, and I would say that in general, the people that have used it have had pretty good luck. I mean, it works just like regular comb. The economics of it is where the struggle really kicks in because it's very expensive. Making it is very expensive. You're using a lot of wax. It's incredibly delicate. So I've heard a lot of complaints around getting it shipped. It breaks really easily. And so from a bee perspective, seems to work great. I haven't heard any complaints. From a cost perspective and an economic standpoint, it's a tough sell.
Yeah. DC says, Blake, so hives are starting to come out of almonds. What are you hearing? Good recovery, or are we still struggling? Sorry if this question was already asked. Sorry if I missed it.
Oh, no, no, you're the first one. Good question. So they look pretty good overall. So the bees definitely recovered. I think with the collapse, whatever was causing the collapse certainly occurred last fall. Last summer, last fall is when the bees were impacted by varroa viruses or pesticides, and they died out over the course of the winter. And so the extent of the loss was realized, in January when beekeepers started going through their hives post winter. But at that point, we saw a little bit of collapsing in like early February as an industry. I didn't see it in my business, but I did talk to some people and did observe some collapsing as the bees were just starting to build up in February. But by and large, by mid to late February, most 95% of bee operations were growing well, seemed to have gotten past whatever was happening, and we're not really seeing the collapse. I would say overall the bees look really good coming out of almonds. We're just seeing a lot less bees come out of almonds, and a lot more bees are dead in almonds than normal because there were so few bees available for almond pollination that, per the grower's request, a lot of beekeepers put in weaker hives than normal just because that was the only bees available. And when you put a lot of bees into almonds that are weaker than normal, a good percentage of those weaker bees die. And so there's a lot more dead, empty hives coming out of almonds than normal. But the bees that did survive are looking pretty healthy overall.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Next question from Keith Spillman. Thanks for checking, Keith. Blake, do you add multiple supers or just one at a time?
Hey, yeah, Keith, great question. Depends on what kind of mood I'm in and how much of a hurry I'm in. So, um, the right answer is it depends on my honey flow. So if I'm on a honey flow that looks really poor, that maybe a good year is only 40 pounds, or it's a dry year, the conditions aren't looking good, then I'm just going to add one super at a time because I'm not going to put on two supers if there's a good chance the bees aren't going to fill up both. But if I'm on a crop or a flow that normally makes 80 pounds of honey and the flow's looking good, and I've got a good, strong hive that's, 80%, 90% full already, yeah, I'll add two supers all the time. I'm not going to put two supers on a weak hive that's only half a box full of bees. But if I've got a rip roaring hive bursting at the seams, honey flow looks really good. Yeah, I don't hesitate to put on two at a time. Yeah,
Yeah.
do that
That's
all the
probably
time.
that's probably that's probably what I did as well. I
Good. Yeah.
last let's see here. Last year, I did my flow. I just probably most of the house had one super, and then one had two, and then the other two had uh, full deeps because that's kind of what
Mhm.
I had at the moment. So I just put some queen excluders through there and just let them let them do their thing and got some honey. So I
Yeah.
usually two supers. It depends, like you said, on the size of the colony. But
Mhm.
last year I had a whole bunch of good colonies. Strong, healthy ones that were able to produce some good honey. So this year is just going to be growing, like I said. Let's see.
Yeah.
But also
And
we
that,
have.
that
Go ahead.
oh, that's a great point. And I think sometimes it depends on what your schedule is too. If it's 3 weeks before you can get back to work, check your bees, then yeah, you might want to put two supers on because you don't want to risk them overfilling and risk swarming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That can happen all the time. We're already 14 minutes left in this live stream. So if y'all have any more questions, feel free to put them in the comment box. Every time when I do these things, they always go by fast, especially this one. Steve says, I think he's talking about the that drawn comb. You have to be careful how you install it. Follow the directions. Get it pre-installed, but you still get it beat up. But you will still get it beat up if it is shipped. I suggest picking it up at a show.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, you're right on, Steve. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people complain after getting it shipped that yeah, it was pretty torn up in shipment.
Y'all be sure to watch the Bee Supply once a month webinar with Blake Chook. Probably the best teaching out there, and it's free. So well done.
That's very kind, Stan. Very generous of you. I might debate that. I've seen some other pretty awesome ones, but thank you. That's kind.
Yeah. Let's see here. We have Tim and Hannah from Gunline Bees down here in Mobile, and they ask Blake, what is the best startup profit for someone wanting to create a business in beekeeping, selling honey, nukes, or equipment?
That is a really good question. That's a really good question. I have to think about that for a second. I mean, if I were starting all over again, I might pick up queen rearing because um, you can sell an unlimited amount of queens, in the spring months. And that's pretty cool to have a market that's pre-established that you don't have to do that much marketing in and sell all of your product. But the challenge is queen rearing is tough, and so you got to be pretty experienced and good at it, or you're not going to make any profit. So if you really know what you're doing in beekeeping, queen rearing can be pretty cool. Other than that, I would say it depends on your local market. Selling nooks can be really profitable. It's a lot more saturated than it used to be. I would say that if you just have four or five, six beehives and you don't want to grow, then selling, a nook off of each one every spring is very profitable. And it's pretty easy to sell 10 nooks, at your local bee club. So on a small scale, nooks are fantastic. And then I would say after that, it would be um, diversifying your products a little bit. So instead of just selling honey, make creamed honey. So do some value add to your product to get a better margin on it. And then the last thing that's a little out of the box is if you're really experienced at beekeeping and you like working with people, then doing kind of concierge service for new beekeepers can be pretty profitable. So charge $75 an hour, to go, spend 2 hours with a brand new beekeeper and show them how to make a split, show them how to harvest honey, etc. So those are some ideas off the top of my head. And now if you're talking about going in, full time as a business, um, that's a bigger discussion because it depends on, are you willing to travel? What part of the country are you in? Et cetera.
Yeah. Now this question from Keith. I've talked about it before. I've tried it as well. He asked, Blake, do you go to the trouble to under super when adding another box?
Um, Generally, no. The exception to the rule for me is when I have a lot of foundation. So if I have a box with a lot of foundation or a box that is solid foundation, then yes, I'm going to under super for sure. If I've got all drawn comb, I don't bother. I don't.
Oh yeah.
To me, it's not worth the effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I have drawn comb, I'm always going to put it on top because those bees will get up there pretty fast and start, fixing it up and putting some honey in it. And actually, in a second, I want to get to drawn comb, which I've talked about in my last video. I also have tried under super, and especially with foundation. There's one time where I really couldn't get the bees to draw out comb, and I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before where I was trying to get them to draw out some supers, and they never did so, and I couldn't get them to draw them out. So I tried to under super. That really didn't work. But last year I had the same exact problem at the top super. Put it on the comb. I did a video asking people what I should do, and add some wax to it. That's probably the problem to that situation. But I never got around to putting any wax on there, unfortunately. But eventually, after 1 month of just sitting there and bees doing nothing, they finally started to draw it out, and that's why my me harvesting the honey was a little bit later. We actually harvest honey like mid-July, and almost turned into a disaster. But
Mhm.
luckily, it was rain. It started to rain, so it really didn't get as bad as it could. During the dearth, and that can get pretty bad whenever you're trying to harvest honey outside without we didn't have any screened or anything, and multiple people said that in the comment section. I need to get a screen around if I'm going to do that that time of year, because man, they're all over the empty frames and the frames that were I was just about to start to put
Mhm.
in my extractor. So, but they eventually drew it out. I still don't know what the problem was. Probably was just, it took them a while. They didn't have a good wax coating on there. Probably wasn't. It was wax coated to begin with, but it was probably some old wax coat. Is probably the reason. But I've tried it before, and actually probably I think I did some videos on it, and I mean it can work um if you have to do it with foundation. I
Yeah.
think there's another question up here. Let's see. Oh, here you go, Steve. Says one more question. I've had poor success introducing Carney and Saxatras into mostly Italian colonies. I think that I will try to push in cages next time, like Gus Mitchell. Any pro tips?
Yeah, pushing cages certainly help. You know, I would say that smaller hives accept queens a lot more readily than bigger hives. And then hives that are on a honey flow or are being fed accept queens much more readily. So I am feeding 1-to-1 sugar water a week before I try to introduce a queen, and a week after I introduce a queen. Um, I ideally do it to splits. If you're trying to introduce a new queen into a double deep full of bees, that's tough. It's tough to get them to accept the queen. So smaller hives do it better. And yeah, pushing cages. The thing I don't like about pushing cages is it's hard to sometimes get the queen in there. But if you can get her in successfully, then it does help. It does help with the acceptance process for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I said that I didn't have any more topics, but this quick question personally from me that I
Sure,
wanted to
of course.
um ask. We have some more questions on there in the comments we'll get to. If you have any more questions in this last 7 minutes, we'll try to get to them before we start closing this thing out.
Mhm.
So let's see here. Last year going into winter, I had a lot of problems with losing queens. That was my big problem. And in winter, I lost one queen as well. But around that time, before I started losing a whole bunch of queens, not a whole lot, like not a commercial scale. Well, just like maybe 3, 2, 4, somewhere around that number. But right before I did that, I treated with Apigard. So I was wondering if it was just some type of coincidence, or maybe some treatments have effects that maybe it could potentially, kill a queen, which I know Formic Pro can, but I never really thought Apigard. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
It
it's a
might
good
just be a
question.
coincidence.
Yeah, that is a good question. I have not seen. I mean, Apigard. has some heat sensitivity. How hot was it when you were treating with it?
It was in fall. We can get pretty warm in fall. I can't
Yeah.
remember off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
it gets pretty warm
I,
around here.
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if it's possible, because anytime you're fumigating something like that in the hive, it can have an effect on the queens. That's not a common side effect with
No,
Apogard. It can affect the brood if it's
no.
especially if it's 95, 90 to 100 degrees, it can affect the brood. So I would say it's possible. I wouldn't be shocked if it did it. It's not super common, but if it was really warm outside and you saw a sudden queen loss after treatment, I would blame it on that.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, it could just be a coincidence, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of things that could
Yeah.
happen, but it could just be some type of coincidence and something different. It might have just been bad luck. Let's
There's
see.
plenty of that in beekeeping too.
Yep, absolutely. A Larimore of Farms, Keith, thanks for checking in. A Blake for a new bee getting
Mm,
their first, or beekeeper getting their first colony. What line do you recommend for them?
mm. Good question. I would err as a brand new beekeeper towards something gentle. um, because you're brand new to beekeeping. You're probably still a little nervous, and there's nothing worse than working a really mean hive. So I would go with an Italian or Cordovan, or maybe my favorite. What I use in my operation is an Italian Carnolian hybrid. I love those because Italians are gentle, they brood up really well, they produce a lot of honey. Carnolians are a little tougher. So that Italian Carnolian hybrid should be really good. I would just avoid. Um, I'm going to get in trouble, but I would avoid getting a lot of queens like out of southern Florida,
Yeah,
or areas where you've got a lot of Africanized influence. I would err on the side of gentle.
yeah. I run all Italians, but even down here, sometimes those Italians can get somewhat spicy, especially in dearths
Yeah,
and stuff. But I
for
run
sure.
mainly Italians, and they're mainly nice and calm. I've had multiple, mean colonies, nasty colonies, that would just get after you whenever you get into them. Especially this one colony that I split them. Unfortunately, that genetics, whatever's not alive, it's probably for a good thing because they're pretty feisty. It was just a feral colony I caught.
Yeah.
Very small little colony, maybe the size of this right here, in a little bucket that was hanging on side of a fence tree. I tried to grab
Mm,
the bucket and take it back, put it in a box,
yeah.
and nuke and let them grow. But that colony grew pretty fast, and along with that, they got really mean. And then whenever I did this exact video doing some splits, very very small splits, that's the reason why
Hmm.
unfortunately they didn't make it through winter. If I never did that, then they'd probably still be here because they were a very strong colony.
Yeah.
So I did the video. I was gonna upload it. I really didn't have any intentions because the audio was terrible with all the bees flying around or whatever. But I decided, hey, I guess people won't really care. It's terrible audio or whatever. But I uploaded it, and that ends up being one of my most popular videos. I
Of
really don't know
course.
why, because I
Mm,
look at the video, I'm like, how come this video did well? Because
yeah.
I really didn't touch the editing. I went into my editing software. I just scanned over it very, very fast. Did nothing to it, and then I uploaded and goes boom. But it was a very, very mean
Mm,
colony, and
yeah.
um, I really don't know what type of a trait was. I'm thinking it'd be a Russian. I don't know if it would be an Africanized colony. I haven't really seen any down here. I know there's more out west and maybe even down Florida, but I still really don't know. I suspect it is Russian, but I've never had a a true Russian that I know mainly just
Mm,
my
mhm.
stuff twisted with
Yeah.
other things. So this question for me, when we're talking about genetics, what do you run? Like, do you run Italians? What's your favorite genetic to run?
Yeah, so ours are all, I mean, they're mutts, so it's the best,
Yeah.
the best from our commercial operation. But I would say its closest would be Italian Carnolian hybrid. So yeah, Italian Carnolian hybrids by far my favorite.
Oh yeah, most of mine I have no idea what they are. I just call them
Yeah,
mutts mixed with some
yes,
Russian and some
yeah,
Italians and maybe
those are the best.
Carniolans. I have no
Yeah,
idea what's out in the
yeah, yeah,
real world. But,
yes.
well,
There's
I guess
not many pure genetics anymore out there.
yeah. I think we have a question here from Steve. I think this is for you. It says, if we have time or more with the efficiency of formic against tropic mites, I've thought about learning to use it now. Is there any risk of Aurora becoming immune with extended exposure?
Yeah, I would say no, not in general. So all the acids, well, the two, formic and oxalic acid, very, very, very little chance because the acid is eating away at the varroa mites. And so yeah, it's very unlikely that the varroa mites could ever develop a resistance to the acids. I mean, never say never, I guess. We said that about amatraz, and we seem to be seeing. Yeah, I still think amatraz is going to be effective for a while,
Yeah.
but we're starting to see some resistance. But yeah, the general consensus is that formic and oxalic should be pretty safe as far as resistance goes, thankfully. But
I
formic's
use
tough to use. You
yeah.
got to be very careful with it.
Yeah, that's why I haven't used it. I've heard a lot about killing queens and stuff. I just mainly used Apigard. I'm going to use it more, but I'm going to be a little more specific on the temperatures and stuff. I think that could cause a problem because down here in Alabama we have a lot of hot temperatures, so I'm going to do that better whenever I use it. Move that out of the way, but yeah, I've used like Apivar before. That's been one of my favorites that I've
Yeah,
used in the past.
yeah,
And I've been
yeah.
trying to, move around with things and try new things. I might try to do some oxalic acid because
Mhm.
I want to try to swap up treatments. I don't want to leave one thing in there for too long. Just do a couple. I don't want to, go crazy with it or anything. Like
Right.
do like 5 treatments and do it all the time.
Yeah.
For at least at my level. If I was bigger, I could. But at my level, I'm just gonna get 2, maybe 3 treatments to swap back and forth, just to,
Yeah,
just
I
prevent.
think that's more than sufficient. I think that's really smart. Yeah.
Yeah. Larimar Farms, Blake, what's the best way to control small hot beetles?
Well, leave the Gulf Coast area. That's my first suggestion. So don't keep bees in the Gulf Coast. A strong hive. So I don't treat for small hive beetles at all. It's all about really strong hives, and they should be able to control the small hive beetles. I mean, small hive beetles are like the vultures of the bee industry, right? They clean
Mhm.
up what something else damaged.
Yeah.
So not having bees in shade helps too, because small hive beetles seem to do better in the shade. So getting those bees into the sunlight helps, making sure that there's nowhere for the small hive beetles to hide. So like screen bottom boards are helpful because small hive beetles don't like the ventilation. They
Yeah.
don't like the light. So, if you're right along the Gulf Coast, I'd do screen bottom boards, make sure your bees are in the sun, and then just really maintain good, strong, healthy hives, and don't ever let a hive get down to where it's like less than 2 or 3 frames of bees and brood. It needs to be good bee population, and so you've got to combine hives a little more aggressively and not let them get small, because if they get small, the small hive beetles can certainly make a mess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. DC, I praise the Lord I do not have small house beetles in Washington.
Very
You're
lucky.
lucky.
You're very lucky. Yes.
Yeah. I deal with them, all the time. I remember in 2023, I don't know if y'all had any problems, which I think most people down south, during the 2023 spring and during the dearth, they had some problems. I had a lot of problems with the flow because in April we had a cold snap that pretty much killed everything, and we had a very tough spring. We still had some things come in. It was just kind of small stuff, and it just wasn't really the best. But that dearth was probably one of the worst I've ever seen. I would go out to the bee yard and in one colony, man, just foul. I don't want to go overuse it, but there was a whole bunch of beetles in there, and a whole bunch of them, at least 2 or I think 1 or 2 absconded because of the beetle problems. And
Mm,
I mean, it was a mess. But then I also had one that got robbed and all that stuff, and all. But it was a terrible dearth. I hope I never see it again.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it
That
was
makes it
pretty
tough.
bad for us. Yeah, it made
Yes. Yes.
everything tough during that time. That's pretty much why I came out with one colony. I really didn't go in strong.
Mhm.
I guess in a second we get going. Check for any more comments. We'll pop them up and answer them. Um, I love my Blake. I love my super jacket. Everything is super high quality. Would you consider making a high quality veil alone in the summer? That's how I like to work.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve. I really appreciate that compliment. We haven't, but we easily could. So I will pass that on to our team that works on our jackets and suits tomorrow. Great suggestion. Yeah, we haven't. I'm not sure why, but we could certainly do that. Good suggestion.
Oh yeah. The challenge for small hive beetles is making splits post flow. The small hive beetle population is way up at that point, and you got to make really strong splits. In my opinion, I've done it wrong many times.
Yeah.
I think
Agreed,
that's probably what
Steve.
happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
There's nothing good that comes out of weak splits. Yeah.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the reason. A lot of mine were small splits, and the small happy took over. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess we are 1 hour and 4 minutes into this live stream. I guess we'll go on and get going. I want to thank everybody for joining tonight's chat. If you're watching live or the replay, I really do appreciate y'all, and I appreciate you, Blake, for joining us tonight. It's been really fun.
Yeah. My pleasure. I really appreciate the invite. Really do.
Absolutely. So y'all, I left in the description, Blake's YouTube channel and his website. So y'all check that out. If y'all don't haven't already, it's some good stuff there. Y'all go and click the thumbs up button on this video and check out some Blake's videos. Thank y'all all for watching. We'll catch y'all next time.